All right, so you think about Bitcoin, a lot of times you're looking at maybe the evolution of Bitcoin. How did this technology come to be? Also, how is it going to be advanced? So we thought, hey, let's dive into it deep with someone from Bitcoin Magazine today that I think will kind of give you a little bit better understanding of the whole idea around where Bitcoin is today and also kind of where it came from. My name is Paul Barron. This is TechPath. As you guys know, here on the show, we cover all things really kind of innovative tech. Of course, that's everything from EVs, AI, robotics, obviously cryptocurrency will really be kind of our topic today. And joining me, of course, is the technical editor over at Bitcoin Magazine, Aaron Van Wirdum. Great to have you on the show.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so you are the Bitcoin expert from a technical aspect. So typically, we get a lot of people on that talk kind of on the grander scale of where cryptocurrency is going. What we want to do is maybe drill into more of the nuts and bolts of Bitcoin and the tech itself. Before we go down that direction of some of the advancements that have been made, let's talk a little about the kind of the evolution of Bitcoin, where it came from, kind of its transcendence into modern day society.
Sure. Yeah. Bitcoin didn't come out of nothing. It wasn't some sort of magical technology that dropped from the sky. Sometimes people still seem to have that impression because before Bitcoin, there was nothing like Bitcoin that made it to the mainstream in any sort of way. So it looks like Bitcoin came from nothing, but that's really not the case. Bitcoin has sort of a long prehistory of people that were working on this kind of stuff, prior projects that didn't quite make it. Also, a lot of economic history in the very different realm. So you've got the tech realm, the techies, the Silicon Valley guys, the hackers. They were trying to thinking of ways to do digital cash. And then at the same time, you have sort of the Austrian economists who have a different idea of what money is, for example. And in a way that kind of got merged into Bitcoin, I think. So, to name I'd say on the technical side, it really started with the invention of public key cryptography, right? So that's before this was invented in 1976 by Whitfield Diffie and Ethan Hellman. And am I saying that's right? Yeah. I'm not sure if Ethan was his first name. Martin Hellman. Well, anyways, Whitfield Diffie and Hellman. Before them, cryptography was really something that was something secret agents were using and military people were using. It wasn't something that common people would use, basically for anything.
Right.
And the reason for that was that in order to be able to communicate anonymously, you first needed to share a secret key, a shared key. You actually had to meet somewhere and give it to someone else, because if you want to do that over, say, a phone line, then the phone line could be tapped, and then whoever is tapping the phone line can after that just listen to all of the conversation. They can decrypt it as well. So there's no point there. So you really you needed a secure way of sharing a secret, and only after that could you securely communicate. Now that idea was so public key cryptography changed all that. With public key cryptography, anyone can have a public key and a private key, and you never need to have met, but you can still send encrypted messages to someone's public key, which someone else can then decrypt with their private key. So that was basically for communication, and it was also used, they figured out a way to use it for digital signatures, which is a way of proving that you've actually saw the information, signed the information. So in a way, agree with the existence of the information. So for example, I could sign a message that says, in the case of digital cash, I'm sending this amount of money to Paul. And then if I sign it, that means, I've signed it with my public key. It could have only been me. So now there's sort of a proof that I actually want to send you that money. Now, this kind of technology was, this invention sort of set loose a whole number of, it really inspired mathematicians and these kinds of people to think of new applications for this technology. And one of the people that got interested in this was David Chaum, who was a cryptographer, and he figured out a way to do cash, digital cash. The way it worked in his system was you'd still sort of have money in a regular bank, but this bank would hand out digital cash. Just you could withdraw digital cash in the same way that you withdraw paper cash from the bank, send it to someone else, and then that person can withdraw it in their own bank. And that's how
Right.
you're able to pay someone online without that person needing to know who you are, or you needing to know who that person was, or the bank needing to be involved in that transaction in any way. So it sort of maintained the privacy of actual paper cash in a digital form, which David Chaum thought that's a crucial thing to have if we're moving to a digital world. The alternative is that there's some party, whether it's MasterCard or PayPal, which didn't exist back then, but some party who knows exactly who's paying who when. They know exactly who owns what. They might know where you are at any point, and it sort of enables this totalitarian world, and that's what he wanted to offer a solution from. Now,
Right.
that specific design was actually implemented, and it did exist for a little while in the 1990s, but it was never widely adopted. There are a number of reasons for that. Some people think David Chaum was a great cryptographer, but not a great businessman, and that's why he couldn't get it adopted by the mainstream public. At the same time, banks weren't that interested in adopting this kind of technology. So in the end, that didn't really go anywhere. But it did inspire basically a generation of hackers and cryptographers and privacy activists to work on this type of technology. And they kept thinking about other ways to do digital cash, which we can get into if you want.
Okay, so when you think about the birthplace of Bitcoin and Satoshi Nakamoto, in the early days, his involvement was real. I mean, there was several key developers on the project that essentially at one point he kind of just handed it off to one of the lead guys. I can't remember his name, but one of the lead guys
Gavin
there.
Andreessen?
Gavin, yeah. So when you think about why, I guess I'm just kind of curious, do you think there's any theory at all as to why Satoshi Nakamoto walked away from the project at a time when it was really kind of evolving?
Sure. Well, there are a number of reasons. My colleague at Bitcoin Magazine, Pete Rizzo, just wrote an amazing article on Satoshi's early days, which I would recommend everyone to read. I'm not sure what the exact title of the article was. I think it was literally something like Satoshi early days. Google it and you'll probably find it. Pete Rizzo. So there are a number of theories. One theory is that so Bitcoin is interesting in that it's decentralized, right? So it's decentralized. There's no single point where it can be shut down by anyone or changed by anyone. And Bitcoin isn't the first technology to have that. You have, for example, something like BitTorrent, which has something like that as which is decentralized as well. You can't really, there's no BitTorrent offices to raid or shut down. There's no BitTorrent CEO in that sense, although I think there's a company with the same name, but they don't actually control the BitTorrent network in that sense. So Bitcoin has that as well, and it's very important for Bitcoin to have that. And I think it's even more important for Bitcoin to have that than a project like BitTorrent. In the case of BitTorrent, it's mostly a legal thing. It's important that legally no one is responsible. Because we've seen what happened with Napster and other file sharing systems. Actual individuals can get in trouble with the law, can be fined huge amounts or these kinds of things. So there's a legal reason to have this separation from sort of the decentralized project and an individual. I think in Satoshi's case it's even more important because Bitcoin is money. It's a type of money. It's a type of money for the world, and I think it should be neutral money. It shouldn't be controlled by anyone. That's sort of a designed goal of it. And especially when it's something important as money, I think if you have someone that will generally be considered the leader, or the lead maintainer or anything like that, that itself potentially becomes a problem. What if
Right.
Satoshi
Yeah.
would at some point have been, maybe it gone crazy, or something else happened to him, he was forced to, for example, declare, you know what, this 21 million limit, it's actually not that great, we're going to add inflation to the protocol. It's quite possible that a lot of people would have sort of accepted that as, Satoshi is the leader of this project, so if he wants to go that way, then we should go that way. And I think it's very important for Bitcoin to not have that. There shouldn't be any sort of single individual that has that sort of power, or even soft power, even influence. And I
Right.
think if you read Peter Rizzo's article, for example, you find that Satoshi wasn't around for very long. He was around for 2 years roughly, and even in these 2 years, more and more users sort of started to realize that Satoshi might actually himself be a problem to the project, and they started to sort of defy him on certain design choices he was making. And so maybe that's why Satoshi left. Maybe he thought, these users are right, it shouldn't be me deciding this. Or maybe he didn't feel welcome anymore. That's also possible. There's also, a very interesting point is that towards the end, I think he might have been getting more uncomfortable with that role, also for other reasons. For example, Amir Taki, an early developer, he proposed that WikiLeaks should take donations in Bitcoin.
Right.
There was the banking
Right.
blockade was going on at the time, and WikiLeaks was not able to get any donations through any means, not through credit cards, not through PayPal, not through bank wires. And then Amir Taki suggested, hey, maybe WikiLeaks should use Bitcoin. That was, even though WikiLeaks didn't do that at that time, it was still picked up by news sources. And Satoshi voiced he wasn't happy with that. He thought that it's far too early for Bitcoin to have to face this kinds of government pressure
backlash.
potentially.
Right.
That's not a good thing. We shouldn't be encouraging projects like WikiLeaks to accept Bitcoin donations right now. As a related thing, maybe around the same time, is that Gavin Andresen, who you just mentioned, who was sort of the de facto successor of Satoshi, he went and speak with the CIA, or there was a conference for securities. What's the right English term? What's the English term for these kinds of
The Central Intelligence Agency?
intelligence?
Or
Yeah, thank you. Intelligence agencies. Yeah. So Gavin Andresen went to a conference that was hosted by the CIA or something like that, and after that, we never heard from Satoshi again. Another example of, maybe it had nothing to do with it, maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe Satoshi just realized this project is getting too big. Too much, too much attention from parties that I don't necessarily want attention from, and he figured, the project will probably manage without me, and he left. But we can only speculate. He never really stated the reason why he left or anything like that.
Yeah. It was just
it's
one
fascinating
day he was there,
too.
and
Sorry, what's
one
that?
day gone. Well, I've read a lot about it, just the history of it. Just like one day you're there, one day he was just, a ghost. So a very intriguing story. This is going to be one that will play out. I'm just kind of curious if he's a real, she is a real person,
Or
and
they.
if they are watching today, and maybe just thinking, maybe I make a grand entrance on Saturday Night Live with Elon.
Yeah, maybe. That would be the day. Yeah. No, I refer to him as him personally, just because it's a male name and it's a singular male name. So I figured that makes the most sense. But yeah, maybe it was a group. Very possible. Maybe it was a woman. Very possible. We don't know.
Yeah. So let's dive into some of the technology that you're finding in your efforts in reporting on the sector that are, one, is interesting and fascinating that you feel could help Bitcoin really kind of evolve into the next, generation of Bitcoin?
Sure. Yeah. So I'd say Lightning is a big one. Lightning is still it's a big project that would, it's working, but it's still sort of early days for Lightning. So the thing with
Mhm.
Lightning is Bitcoin has a block size limit. It has a limited number of transactions it can process, which is
Right.
less than 10 per second, and that's nothing if you compare it to
Exactly.
a Visa network or something like that. It's very small number of transactions it can process. Now that's actually needed. It needs to have this limit, because if you don't have this limit, if Bitcoin would have to process 10,000s of transactions per second or whatever the number is that Visa is reaching, Bitcoin is a decentralized peer-to-peer network, and users are actually running nodes and using nodes, and they should, if they want to be optimally secure, if they, basically every user is him or herself validating every transaction, checking that everything on the network is going like it should. And if they have to validate every transaction, that's not possible on
Right.
a regular PC, or on that would have to be dedicated to data centers. Now, if you
Sure.
dedicate it to data centers, that's a big risk. That's basically a centralizing factor. Once you go down that road, then Bitcoin could perhaps be changed by whoever controls the data centers, or the data centers could be regulated to, implement certain protocol rules or something like that. It's by, just like I explained with BitTorrent just now, it's by having this decentralized peer-to-peer network where everyone's validating the rules themselves. That's how Bitcoin stays Bitcoin, I would argue. That's
Yeah.
how it
Pure. Sure.
stays secure. That's how the rules stay secure. That's how you maintain the 21 million limit, among other things. So there's a good reason to have this limit, to have a limited number of transactions per second. But the obvious downside is, there's a lot of people that want to make transactions. So right now that's solved by, highest bidder gets in, limited number of transactions. Whoever pays the most for a transaction gets in. But that means that a whole class of transactions, a whole class of people can't really use Bitcoin, because, you're not gonna pay $8 for transaction if you're buying. Well, a coffee is the classic example.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what we need is a layer on top of Bitcoin. Now that's possible. That's technically possible to build a layer on top of Bitcoin, and this layer will allow us to make transactions all day long, and it's only, or all year long, or we can just keep making transactions, and then after a while it's settled, so to say. So for
Right.
example, Paul, you and me can make hundreds of transactions between us, and at some point in the future we say, okay, we're done transacting now, let's settle whatever the two of us own to each other on the blockchain, and now you have just one blockchain transaction instead of hundreds.
Right.
With the Lightning Network, this is also networked. So it's not just between two people, but if you know someone that I don't, then I can pay you and you pay that person. So I'm sort of
Yeah.
paying you through that person. And this is all still happening off blockchain. So this is
Right.
amazing scaling technology that's now in development for Bitcoin. And it's live, it's operational, but there's a lot of work to be done. And I would say the other big one, so this is sort of, I'd say there are probably two main challenges for Bitcoin. One of them is scaling, which I just described. The Lightning Network is a great solution for that. It's not the only solution, there are other solutions, but Lightning Network is very interesting. And I'd say the other big challenge is privacy. Like I mentioned, that was sort of an original design goal for digital cash in the first place. People need to be able to make transactions privately without anyone knowing who owns what or who's paying who, or you don't want this sort of draconian totalitarian control over a money system like this. So privacy needs to be improved, and there are a range of projects for that. There are a range of sort of separate projects that use Bitcoin as Bitcoin is designed right now. The Lightning Network, which I just mentioned, also offers more privacy, by the way. But there are, coin mixing kind of tools. There
Right.
are coin swapping kinds of tools. There are a number of things, and the Bitcoin protocol itself is also evolving. So one of the next steps, one of the protocol upgrade that's proposed right now, and developers are discussing how to actually roll it out at the moment as we speak. In fact, as we speak, there is actually a rollout in process. If miners activate, it's called Taproot. If miners activate it within the next couple of months, then the upgrade will go live by November this year. So that's called Taproot. What that is so basically Bitcoin supports smart contracts. That's not something exclusively for altcoins. It's also something Bitcoin does. Bitcoin does it in how should I call it? It has limited amounts of smart contracts tools, but these can be combined in all sorts of clever ways to enable a lot. And there is room for new tools if someone comes up with a new tool that would improve the Bitcoin protocol in a way. What Taproot does is it sort of takes the tools that are available now, but right now, if you want to use smart contract tools, so an example would be this coin can only be spent on January 1st, 2022, right? That's a very simple smart contract. You're sending
Yeah.
money to someone, but that person can't spend it until later. Or, a very simple smart contract would be this money can only be spent if 2 out of 3 people agree. Or it can only be spent if someone reveals some sort of secret, which, is then derived from some other sort of contracty structure. Now, this is all available today. The thing is, today, if you want to use this, it's visible on the blockchain. It's very clear what someone is doing, and this in
Right.
turn, this is bad for privacy, basically. So this would allow you to, for example, filter out certain wallets. You could see what kind of wallet someone is using, and you can use that information to kind of construct which coins then probably belong to who. It's also something like the Lightning Network, which I've now mentioned a few times. Right now, you can sort of see when the Lightning Network is being used. And if you have something like Taproot, it all sort of becomes one blur. Regular transactions and Lightning transactions, they all sort of look the same. So these are all privacy improving technologies. With Taproot, all of these smart contract tools can be sort of hidden in a regular looking transaction. So that's good. So that's good for scalability, which I mentioned, because you don't have to broadcast all of this different information on the blockchain, and it's good for privacy because you're sort of hiding it in a regular transaction. So the two main challenges that I see, scalability and privacy, Taproot, which is being rolled out now, is great for both.
Yeah. All right. So you've got two key areas there. We've had some people on here recently talking about the Lightning Network and, some applications that they're implementing. One of it is around the whole idea of podcasting 2.0 and Voltage and what they're doing with Breeze Wallet, which it starts to enable some of those transaction capabilities, especially in micropayments that kind of go in that direction. So that's kind of cool that is going. When you look at Bitcoin as really kind of being the standard that most likely will be looked at as the primary currency, at some point, beyond Lightning, beyond going into dealing with some of the protocol challenges, is there any other tech that could be coming down the line that people are just now starting to maybe explore that would affect Bitcoin maybe in the next decade?
Sure. I mean, an interesting one that people have been talking about for a long time are sidechains.
Yeah.
Sidechains. Yeah. And there are a few of these already. You've got a liquid sidechain, for example, which exists between exchanges, and it allows users to very quickly move money from exchange to another exchange, so they don't have to wait for confirmations, and they can
Right.
perform arbitrage basically immediately. But there are more sidechain ideas, which, for example, drive chain is the term of one of them, which would be secured in a different way. Now, there's a lot of discussion on what the best way of securing it is, but if this is rolled out, if it is figured out, if it is considered, safe, then that would basically allow Bitcoin. That would basically, any altcoin you can think of, any sort of technology that any altcoin has, whether it's the privacy technology of Monero or Zcash, or the more extensive smart contracting functionality of something like Ethereum, or whatever you can think of, it could potentially become a second layer on Bitcoin. So in that, if that happens, then you can use all of this technology while also still sort of respecting the 21 million limit that Bitcoin has. So you're using Bitcoin in all sorts of different ways, in all sorts of crazy ways, potentially very private, very, so that's something that's potentially coming up. There are several ideas to even further improve the Lightning Network. These are arguably incremental improvements, but still important ones, I think. What else is down the pipeline? I'm sure I'm forgetting something interesting. Yeah, there's this idea where it would be in a new type of smart contracting idea where you send money to someone and you make a very specific, how that money can be spent afterwards. So it's not just that this already sort of exists with the time locks I mentioned, but you can make it far more extensively. Several steps, like it has to go through these steps for whoever is going to spend it next, and that would allow all sorts of new smart contracts. These are probably the three main ones I can think of right now that are sort of down the pipeline.
The attribution. Attribution of that. All right, so let's take a look at kind of the growth of where Bitcoin has come from in the past 2-3 years. We've seen fairly significant adoption. Obviously, Bitcoin Magazine, your following has increased dramatically. What are you guys seeing in terms of adoption in the future? Do you feel like where are we in the stage of adoption, especially when it comes to cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, over the cycle that we're existing now? Do you feel like we're still in the very, very nascent beginning, or do you feel like we finally have matured as a potential market here?
I mean, the question you're really asking then is, what is the end goal, right?
True.
Well, if the end goal is world money, world reserve currency, then we're very, very early still, Paul.
Very early. Yeah, very early.
Yeah, I mean, there are several sort of places where Bitcoin can end up. I think it could end up collapsing, right? It could end up failing. Maybe this experiment will still fail. That's one possible future, I think. It could also sort of stagnate to this sort of more speculative thing that techies might use, or that has niche use cases. That's possible. It could become really sort of a digital gold, where where in the same way of what gold is today, people use it as a store of value, but you don't buy anything in the store, even for international settlements or something like that. Gold isn't used anymore.
Exactly.
So Bitcoin could end up there, or maybe Bitcoin will actually become the world reserve currency and the money of the planet. That's also a possible scenario, I think.
Lots of potentials here.
Yeah, the future is unwritten, Paul.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting. Well, okay, so I think this is a good point to kind of go from when you look at both the trends potential there, adoption rate pretty high right now. And I'm kind of just curious on your own user base. You guys kind of came from publishing in the mid 2000s, and now as one of the premier publications on Bitcoin. Obviously, your user base has grown, so that means there's got to be more interest in it. Do you guys continue to see the pace and growth around just what's happening in terms of the news cycle for what you guys are doing?
Oh, just a few years ago, that there was maybe one interesting piece of news a week, and now you can't keep up even on a single day if you try. I feel like.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's also why I personally, for example, have specialized a lot more. There's just no way to, keep up with everything Bitcoin or cover everything Bitcoin. That there's no single individual who can do that anymore. So that I'm more interested in tech and history. That's something I find interesting. So that's sort of my specialty. But then there's other reporters that focus more on Bitcoin in the context of financial markets or in the context of geopolitics, maybe. And yeah, it's becoming a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
The
and
field has
we're gonna have
exploded because,
so we're organizing the Bitcoin 2021 conference in Miami next month, and that looks
yep.
like it's gonna be amazing. It looks like it's gonna be the biggest conference ever when it comes to Bitcoin. So yeah, there's definitely huge growth going on in this industry. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, it's going to be fun to watch, and definitely keep a very tight line on it, because the flow of content and material that's coming in, and mainly trying to absorb it all, has been, as you said, it's just it's light speed now for sure. But hey, man, it's been great having you on. I definitely want to keep in tune with you, Aaron, as things continue to develop, especially around Lightning, because I'm really fascinated with where Lightning is going to be going and some of the protocols that are going to be utilized on it. A lot of use case scenarios. We're talking with several of the developers that are working on podcasting 2.0, which is the Breeze guys and all that. I'm intrigued with that, on how micropayments might work. So I definitely will stay in touch with you. But thanks for stopping in on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you guys are listening in over on the podcast. Make sure and tune in and subscribe. But if you are plugged in here to YouTube, make sure and hit the like button right now, and also hit the bell, because that's going to give you notifications of content coming out of our network here. And also, it's going to hopefully give you guys some awareness of kind of the breadth of content that we really go through. We do cover obviously EVs, AI, robotics. We go into cryptocurrency quite a bit, and then kind of this new era of innovation in technology. If you have an idea for the show, you can shoot that over to us, which is just producer at reverendnetworks.com, or you can hit me up on Twitter at Paul Barron. So we'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.